Hello and welcome to the Wereldhave H1 2018 results call. My name is Courtney and I'll be your operator for today's event. For the duration of the call, you will be on listen only. However, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. If you need assistance at any time, please press *0 on your telephone keypad and you will be connected to an operator. I will now hand you over to your host, Ruud van Manen, to begin today's conference.
Good morning everyone and a warm welcome to the H1 2018 results of Wereldhave. Today here present in the room are Dirk Almbeek, CEO, and Dennis de Vrede, CFO. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Dirk. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ruud, and thank you all for dialing in on this another sunny day in Europe. I would like to start on page number 5 with the highlights of the results H1 2018. I think overall I would like to say we have a very solid operational performance. I think Belgium, Finland, the Netherlands were already stable, and France clearly is under control now. It's our third quarter where the occupancy went up, and the NRI clearly is stabilizing as we have promised before. I think in France as well, 4 out of the 6 centers are having a decent performance. One is, I would say, almost secured because we are on the edge of signing a big tenant there. And the only one where we still are working in a feasibility study is Mériadeck in Bordeaux. If you look at our like-for-like, the Netherlands and Finland are around 0, so they have a decent performance. France is clearly improving from -7 to -3%. And Belgium has an incidental negative, but the second half year, I'll come back to that later, will be better. Business-wise, I think some of the highlights are the opening of Le Bastion in Tournai, where the occupancy already stands at 98%. The opening of Primark in Le Havre, which also gave a boost to the visitor numbers there of 30% year to date. The cinema in Finland is clearly on track, as well on budget, as well as timing-wise. And I think Maassluis in the Netherlands is already at 97% occupancy since it's finished from development. If we then move to the highlights as such, I would say the direct result is relatively stable. The only slightly negative is that disposals were not fully compensated by the standing portfolio disposals in 2017, of course, as you know. Indirect result clearly negative. I would say there Finland is as expected. We have already said that the cinema conversion from Antilla is clearly a non-yielding capex for the time being, so that really comes back into the valuation. I think the Netherlands is also a disappointment, but in line with the market and some recent transactions in let's say the weakest segment of our portfolio. So we've already announced the end of last year that 3 of our centers were hit in valuation. I think those centers are still being had a further small write-off or bigger write-off. I need to say, I think 3 or 4 of them, it's still the same group. So where we are in Greater Amsterdam area like Hoofddorp, Greater Rotterdam like Maassluis, Greater Utrecht like Nieuwegein, Tilburg, city number 6 in the Netherlands, Arnhem, those valuations are very stable, but the lower end of the spectrum is clearly weak at this point in time. The good news is that Belgium, but also France, has been relatively flat in valuations. The EPRA NAV, of course, came down because of the negative revaluation. Dividend we talked a lot about in the full year numbers, so 252 for this year. Loan to value creeped up. We're still very committed to make sure that number will come down to below 40% again by working on disposals, and we're currently working on several objects from that perspective. But disposals were soft in the first half, and hopefully will pick up in the second half. Outlook has been further precised, so we're now aiming for 333 to 338 per share. And again, the dividend, as you know. If we go to page number 6, we go per country, then you see that the net rental income in Belgium slightly went up. And I will come back on the next page. Like for like is clearly negative. That has to do with the first quarter still, the free parking, which started Q2 2017. And the departure of the Sports Direct in Nivelles, which basically is been replaced by Decathlon, but they start to pay rent from mid of this year, and we expect a strong recovery in the second half of the year. So second half will be positive, and per saldo maybe slightly negative, but second half will certainly be a positive number. Finland, very stable performance at this point in time. We have seen some restructuring in the banking sector. We were quite exposed to bank offices in our center, service counters. 2 of them left. We've been able to replace one of them for the time being. But I would say in general our like-for-like is fairly stable and the asset is performing well. Of course, visitor numbers are slightly down because of all the massive works on the cinema, but even our visitor numbers are better than the average, or clearly better than the average of the market, so we're happy with that performance despite all the works ongoing. France is clearly showing for us better numbers. We have indicated by end of year that our NRI will this year go down year on year by 0 to 5%. I think the first half, we've always said, will still be quite negative because of the full year impact of H&M, Zara and Bango renewals of the contracts. So this number clearly indicates that. We come from -7, we are now at -4% like for like, and we expect that number to further improve during the second half of the year. The Netherlands relatively stable, despite the fact that we sold last year two centers, 2 old Klépierre acquisition centers. So therefore the NRI is slightly negative, but the like-for-like is still rather, I would say, rather positive, and the leasing team is doing a good job in the Netherlands. If we move on to page number 8, there you look at the leasing performance. You've seen we signed a massive number of contracts, 252 contracts the first half of the year, which is 9% of our leasing volume. And clearly overall the MGR has a positive uplift, which is for us a good indication that the market is certainly in some of our parts slightly strengthening. Belgium has been very strong. Finland is relatively weak, but it has to do with one big anchor tenant which we had to secure. So that's why the number there is negative. France clearly positive also in the quality. I've said before we've signed quite some leases in the past where we're not sure how strong the tenant will be. We're now only signing real good tenants who are good for their money. And we also see that we are signing at or above old rent. So that is double good news. In the Netherlands it's still slightly negative, and that only has to do with the fact that we are now attacking some of the units which have been vacant for longer than, let's say, 2 years, and we are leasing them now out at lower levels than previously. But if it's already empty for a long time, then it's better to lease it out and get some cash in. So if we move to page number 9, like for like again, slightly negative. I think I mentioned already a few of them. Belgium clearly, this is really an incidental in Belgium, and we are expecting again positive numbers. And you see the occupancy very rapidly going up now in the shopping center part of our business. So that will, there's always a delayed effect on the like for like, but that effect will clearly kick in second half of this year, but also the first half of next year. Finland, relatively stable, and again the banks had the leaving of 2 bank units had an impact on that. France clearly still the first half year. The fashion retailers the second half of that, and the Netherlands again very stable and decent performance. If we move to page number 10, occupancy. There you see that Belgium is moving up very rapidly, so this will clearly have an impact on the like-for-like going forward. The main improvement there has been in Kortrijk, where our occupancy went up from 88 to 95% in half a year time. So a very good achievement by the leasing team. The only asset we still are having difficulty in leasing out is I would say Genk, and I'll come back to that later. Finland, very stable, strong and decent. France again, clearly picking up, and the number of temps are going down, and we have qualitatively better tenants signing in now, so that is good news. And the Netherlands shows a very steady performance moving up. If we move to page number 11, if we look at the change in visitors, I hope the system still works. There we see in Belgium we're doing better than market. In Finland we're clearly also doing better than the market. In France we're doing better than the market, and in the Netherlands we are doing slightly better than the market. Well, there are especially 2 units to mention. I think Bastion opened mid of April, and since they opened their extension, we see a 50% increase in visitor numbers, so that's a tremendous amount. And in France, in Le Havre, the Primark opened the end of February, and we there see after that an increase in footfall of 30%, so also very strong numbers. Again, Finland negative, but better than the market. The only, for me, slight disappointment is the Netherlands from this perspective, because we're doing better than market, but I think we should do much better than market. So I think there's still some work to do there in improving our visitor numbers. Of course, on page 12, you've seen it probably also already with other retail investors. We've seen quite some soft sales due to very warm weather conditions. The only good news I think now is that the summer collection should have been sold out now, since we are already enjoying beautiful weather for some time. So from that perspective, I think as long as not everyone is buying in sales, that would be good for fashion retailers. Belgium relatively stable, Finland slightly down, but also in line with visitor numbers. And in France, as you know, we do have some overexposure to fashion, so there the number is slightly more negative than in the other countries. With that, I would like to hand over to Dennis for the financial part, and I will come back with a country update and the outlook later.
Okay, thank you, Dirk, and again, welcome to all of you. I'd like to take you through some of the key financial highlights, and I'll start on page 14 with the direct result bridge. Direct result for the first half of 2018 declined with 0.7 million euros to 74.5 million euros for the first half. I would say the largest negative effects on this relates to the disposal of the shopping centers last year in Zwolle and Zoetermeer, and as well as the disposal of the Belgium Madou office building, which was transferred at the beginning of this year. The standing portfolio, as you can see there, shows a healthy positive NRI growth, mainly by taking on Les Bastions and the Koningshoek in Maasluis into operations. I would say the general cost you see there is a positive impact, mostly caused by the restructuring costs we took in the Netherlands last year. If I just move on then to page number 15, which shows our direct result basically for the first half compared to first half this year. Net rental income there is declined by 1.9 million euros to 97.3 million euros. Main negative contributors there were the disposals, as I mentioned earlier. But again, that was largely offset by the impact from those development projects coming into operations. Next to Maasluis and Les Bastions, also we had some, to some extent, the Primark in Dock Vauban in Le Havre impacting this number. Moving on to page number 16, Dirk already mentioned that our NAV, our EPRA NAV, declined slightly from 50 euros per share at year-end 2017 to 48.94. All of that was, well, most of that was, of course, impacted by the direct result coming in, the indirect result obviously having a large negative impact on this, combined with the dividend payout, moving the number down to the 48.94. On the net asset value on page 17, again here, this gives you a sort of a flavor of the historical development of our NAV figures, and obviously also the steep discount it currently, our share currently trades from minus 20% at year-end 17 to minus 31% at the end of Q2 2018. Moving further to page 18, this will show you a bit more our indirect result and the different components. The total indirect result was negative 45.5 million euros, basically all related to our valuation results. Obviously, a few smaller items there are impacting this as well, but they're mostly offsetting each other. Results on disposal, the small one, are on a residential sale in Q1, end of Q1 in Capelle. And the reduction, I would say the tax number there, the 2.7 million, that's our reduction in the DTL, which is driven by Finland and by the Netherlands. On the next page, a much more detailed overview of our revaluations. I'm not going to mention all the numbers here, but I'll take you through a few highlights. A negative revaluation in the Netherlands of minus 25.8 million, and Finland 16.3 million if I exclude the deferred tax component there. As mentioned again, the devaluation in the Netherlands mainly relates to the yield expansions and lower ERV expectation, or less strategic assets, as well as some non-yielding capex, which was about 11 million. Finland, again there, mostly that is related to the development of the Finkino cinema, which is non-yielding at the moment, but we very much expect that will improve the valuation of our shopping center in latter years when it's completed, and the footfall should be obviously positively impacted by that. In France, I would say, or in Belgium maybe first, which is quite obvious, I would say the shopping centers did very well, 10.2 million positive revaluation, mainly from Les Bastions, but we have seen a negative revaluation of our Belgian office portfolio of about 6.9 million, which is also, I think, related to the fact that we changed our assessor in Belgium, and we probably have a more realistic view on our offices at the moment. In France, the value of the portfolio decreased by just 4.1 million. I'd say yields in France remained flat. A bit more graphical breakdown of our valuation results on page 20. Basically the effects of our yield shift and I would say market rent and capex on the other side. There are quite some differences between the countries, as you can see on the slide yourself. What I'd like to point out on this slide really is the large shift in the Belgian offices. Large effect is also, like I said, the result of change in the appraiser, who's taken a bit of a different approach towards the rent levels as well as yields. So with that, moving on to financing. Page 22, our debt profile did not change that much over the past half year, as you can see here. Our committed facilities per the end of June declined to 150 million euros, but this excludes a new facility we have just put in place for 350 million euros. I'll tell you a bit later on that, a bit more. Obviously, due to the slight negative revaluations and as well as the development capex, our loan to value moved up, not unexpected, to 42.2%. Although it's slightly higher than where I would like to have it, between the 35 and 40%, I very much would like to re-emphasize again that at this point we're far away from our 60% LTV covenants. In addition, our interest coverage ratio is still very comfortable at 6.3 times. Moving further to page 23, our debt mix. Again here, debt profile hardly changed. And main focus point for me is the refinancing of the convertible bond, the 250 million euro convertible bond up for repayment next year in May. Many of you have seen on Bloomberg or heard that we've been in the market the past quarter to see if we could issue a hybrid bond, because we believe that would have been a good solution to refinance this, but very much related to market conditions which turned against us, but also against the European capital markets in that period. We decided not to proceed with this track. So with the new additional revolving credit facility of 350 million euros, which has a maximum term of 2 years, we believe we will have ample time to look in the second half of this year to refinance the upcoming maturities in the second quarter of next year. On the ESG side of our business, we are very committed to create sustainable value for all stakeholders by decreasing the environmental impact of our assets and creating a positive local social impact. We've been receiving very positive recognitions from international rating agencies and NGOs and also SRI analysts. I would say we've seen that these awards very much, I would say, there's a number of rewards we've been receiving over the past half year from ISS Econ Research. We've been awarded a prime status. And we also recently were included in that which is on the right hand bottom side, the GPR IPCM LFS Sustainable GRES Index, I would say. So it's a long word, but I would just very much stress that we find this important and we keep focus on our ESG efforts. With that, I'd like to move on to the country updates, and I'll hand it over back to Dirk.
Thanks, Dennis. Let's go to page number 26. Give you a little bit more flavor. I think I won't go through all the numbers here, but I think if we start in Belgium, that has always been for us a stable market, as well in values, even rising a little bit, and over the years, and income. Again, we have a temporary dip in like-for-like, but the second half will be positive, and therefore for the full year, the number will improve. I think on page 27, to give you some more flavor on where we are in the different segments, I think, first of all, the change in MGR of plus 16%, of course, is very noticeable, and it is a strong number. The second strong number, I think, is Kortrijk, where our occupancy went up from 88 to 95. As you all know, Nivelles, Liège, and Tournai traditionally has been at 97, 98, sometimes 100% letting. So there's not too much to gain there. Kortrijk we bought a few years ago at 88. It stayed flat, but now with a new leasing team in place, we moved it to 95. And there's still two big prospects ongoing. One is a big F&B unit. We will maybe also expand the shopping center slightly. And the other one is a very strong in the meantime, very international non-food retailer. So there's still 2 big units to hopefully to sign the second half of the year, which then will bring the occupancy to, I hope, 98% as the other ones. That leaves us with one difficult project, Genk. That remains rather soft. We are doing there some leasing, so we're not sitting still, but it's still soft in leasing, and I think we're there also more looking into mixed use exploration of the center. So not only leasing out retail, but maybe some other ones. On page 28, some recent shop openings. I prefer to mention 2 of them. First of all, Shopping Nivelles. I was there myself 2 weeks ago. There the Decathlon will come where Sports Direct left. It was very interesting that they already, before they're going to open the store in September, they already opened a Connect store. And when we were there, it was very nice to see there were roughly 30 bags hanging there for people picking up their internet orders. So they're already creating quite some traffic in the, let's say, kind of pop-up store they have today. The second one I would like to mention, of course, is Le Bastion, where next to Zara, a very big store, also Bershka opened. And they have really 2 very nice flagship stores. And as far as we know, since the opening, they're very happy with the sales. If we move to page 29, again, Le Bastion, well, here are some numbers. I think I already mentioned them. We only still have 2 units to lease out. So that's not a lot. We're also happy with the mix, also with the new food and beverage coming in. So I think from that perspective, it's been a very successful redevelopment. Of course, Carrefour is still we're still working on. Last time we had to mention that they would leave Liège and they would stay in Genk, maybe in a smaller surface. They now have indicated they would like to stay, both of them, and we are now negotiating with them the terms around it. Of course, rent per square meter will certainly not go down, but let's say the redundancy package is still under negotiation, and of course we are currently negotiating with a few others to pick up the other part of the space, and those negotiations are proceeding well. If we move to Finland, I would like to move to page 31 basically, where you see that, as I said before, the MGR was slightly negative. It looks very negative, which by the way it is, -5, but mainly due to 1, maybe 2 big renewals. 1 big anchor tenant, where we had a slight renewal, which had a big impact on the overall rental levels. For the rest, I would say on new leases, we are at or above ERV. So that is clearly the good news. We're currently very strongly working on sports to increase, because in the tenant mix, there's a big demand by visitors for more sports. So we have already been able to get the first, which you see on page 32, the first JD Sports in Finland entering our center. We're also negotiating another big one at this point in time. And the very good news is that the 8 units next to the cinema, additional food and beverage units, have been all leased out, and one of them to Vapiano. Of course, that is a very strong F&B tenant to get in. So we are now preparing also some plans for food court phase 2, which is on the other side of the pathway. Again, very solid performance of ITIS despite all the works ongoing. So we're very happy with that. If you look at page 33, of course, as we mentioned, it will be the first IMAX, and for the time being the only IMAX in Finland. So as well, Finkino as ourselves are very much looking forward to the impact of that on visitor numbers. It's roughly, it's again a new technology. It's roughly comparable to even a little bit bigger screen than some of you have certainly seen the Mall of Scandinavia. The look and feel of this cinema with 9 screens is quite comparable. So that is very good news, of course, in terms of the potential Vinkino expects from this cinema complex. Restaurant offer we talked about. We also upgraded the Tallinn Square at the entrance, where there's a very nice kids play area now. And we are still fully working on leasing out the rest of the space, although there's a lot of friction vacancy there. So it's 96, 97. You might get it up to 98, but it's not going to be much better than that. Page 34, France. I think occupancy clearly went up. We have said before, we're not just driving occupancy for as a goal as such. We also really want to get better quality tenants in. Now, for example, we signed quite some super dries the last half year. Our doubtful debts is clearly going down, so we're much better financially in control. And I think overall, thanks to a real strong new team now, we're much more comfortable also for the second half and moving into 19. I think the team, we have a management team of 4 people. Of course, Olivier Mouret came from Unibail in the past. And we have someone now from Meshalis, Carmilla and Terranei. So we have a very good blend of people who know the business and the market very well. Page 35, again, I would like there to mention that the NRI decline, the second dot, as we have previously guided you, we're clearly in the bandwidth there, so no misunderstanding. Hopefully it's going to be closer to 0 than -5, but at least we are fully in line with expectations. Again, 4 of the 6 centers are doing well. Saint-Sever, we signed Vapiano and KFC on the first floor, and 86% of the Verrerie redevelopment is leased out, so that is very good news. I was there last week, and the Vapiano works are going on very strongly, and they will open the beginning of September. And we are there really on the edge of signing a very big anchor, which will clearly transform the center to where we want it to be. And that leaves us with Meriadeck, where we have already, in the meantime, made some plans, different plans. We're working on the pre-commercialization. So the feasibility study is on its way. And I'm sure we can announce some further news on that at year end. If we go to page 36, of course, the opening of Primark in Le Havre, a very big one. Also very essential one is the opening of Action in Argenteuil. This is one of those very strong non-food operators expanding very rapidly internationally. And they're clearly driving the footfall of Côté Seine since opening by roughly double-digit numbers, so around 10%. Rituals in Strasbourg opened, Superdry opened in Docks 76, so we have a few very good names signing in. If we look at our development projects in France, page 37, well, the Primark we mentioned, the Verrerie I think are already mentioned, and Meriadeck I mentioned, so I think I would not like to repeat that again. The Netherlands, I would say in general, the sentiment is better in the market. Bankruptcies are clearly lower than we have seen in the last few years. Retail activity is better. We're signing more at or above ERV, which is also as such good news. But we do have still, out of the 16 centers, a few on the low end of the spectrum, 3 to 4 and 12, which are doing well. And as I said before, you also see that back in the valuation. So if we maybe move to page 39, the MGR is relatively flattish. Again, on new leases, it's at or above ERV, so that is as such the good news. And we've also been able to sign some package deals. The point is that we are also now trying, because our occupancy, as shown on page 38, starts to enter a level where roughly around 97%, roughly half of it is friction vacancy, half of it is more, let's say, long-term vacancy. So units difficult to lease out. We're already empty for some more time. We're also now attacking those ones, but we're signing them at slightly or sometimes substantially lower levels than in the past, but at least it will then generate longer-term cash flow. So we there are very much selective on the fact that we want to have tenants in, but they should be clearly not opportunistic, but good for their money. Recent store openings. Very big new Albert Heijn in Presikhaaf. By the way, also in Presikhaaf, which is a new entrance, another food discounter opened, Aldi, which was not there in the past. Roughly a 1,500 square meter store, so next to the Albert Heijn. So that is also good news. I think Presikhaaf is a good example of a redevelopment which goes very efficient, and also the pre-leasing is well on its way. Capelle is for us a little bit more difficult project. We've added on there a slight more part for the redevelopment. That's also why the pre-let slightly went down. City Plaza is one of our best performing assets where we're clearly shining above ERV and Old Rent. It's close to Utrecht, as you know. And as an example, Amy Claire we never mentioned, but it's a very stable animal in our portfolio. So page 41, developments on track. Maassluis clearly success. Koperwiek more difficult. I have to say it's the only one which is currently more difficult. Presikhaaf I think is clearly doing well. We might get 2 more developments the next 2-3 years. The second phase for Tilburg and Sterrenburg, but we are only doing that when it's clearly pre-leased for around 70%, and I think we are very well. Sterrenburg is already there. They are already at 90%, including the expansion, and we're also phasing it more. So we're now working very strongly on Capelle and Presikhaaf. And once we finish those 2, then Sterrenburg, Dordrecht and Tilburg phase 2, after that will be on its way. Then I would like to end up with the outlook. Again, we have further precised our outlook. It's clearly in the bandwidth 330, 340, but we narrowed it from 10 to 5 cents, as you can see. Well, with a result of 170 the first half year, that should be well doable. And the dividend, as said before, has been reset, where we did a lot of scenario analysis to make sure that this is a sustainable level for the next few years. No guarantees in this world, but we are very confident with this level moving forward. Thank you for that. I would like to open for questions.
Operator, this is Ruud van Manen. Could you please ask the audience to open up the Q&A?
Okay, so if you would like to ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. If you change your mind and wish to withdraw your question, please press star 2, and you will be advised when to ask your question. Okay, we do have some questions coming through. So the first question comes in from the line of Herman van der Loo. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello, good morning. Herman van der Loo, Degroof Petercam. Thank you for the presentation. I've got 2 questions at this stage. The first on France, the guidance for like in an area of between 0 and -5. Could you please precise it a bit more? You hinted that it would be closer to 0 than to -5. That's my first question. My second on the LTV. So I understand that the last two dividend payments were still based on the previous level, but still 42% LTV, still creeping up despite quite okay operating performances. Are there more measures that you are considering now to address this LTV going above 40%? And my last question is on ETIS. Could you give us an update on a possible disposal of the asset? Thank you.
Thank you, Herman. I would like to start with the last one. ETIS, as said before, we are very much focusing now on, as you know, we had a so-called disrupted process 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago. We're currently very much focused on getting the cinema in place. I mean, that is a massive work and requires a lot of attention from our local team. Of course, the leasing with quite some rotations where some services like banks left do require a lot of attention. So our focus today is clearly on the commercial side, and that's it. Loan to value, yes, it's creeping up. Clearly, we still have for ourselves the target to lower it to a max of 40%. And we're working on different disposals at the same time to make sure that we will show some progress the second half of this year. And the last one on like-for-like and NRI, yeah, I cannot say much more than, between 0 and -5%. I think we're trending more towards, more towards 0. So I would say take the higher end of the bandwidth. If you break it in two, it's between -2.5 and -5. Then, as we look at it today, we hope to land between -2.5 and 0.
Okay. Thank you.
The next question comes in from the line of Nico Levicari. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you guys very much for the presentation. I've got 2 questions on the Belgian operations that you have. One on the Carrefour. You discussed about the partial release of the contracts and the smaller space of the intention for Carrefour to take on smaller space in these 2 centers and to turn them into supermarkets from hypermarkets. Could you be a bit more specific there on what would be the impact on the gross lettable area, i.e. are they going to take half of the space that they currently have? Regarding Liège, obviously the center is already above the 20% weight that you can have in the Belgian portfolio, and it has the exception. So I was hoping that you could elaborate a bit more on how you intend to solve this during the year, because my understanding is that the exception that you have from FSMA is till the end of 2018, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Carrefour, I think the idea is that they would keep 40 to 50% of the space, and of course for releasing the other part they have to pay some compensation. We're currently discussing that with them. That will then clearly make an attractive food service supermarket, which is, I think, as such, also for the shopping centers more appealing than a big hypermarket, which is half dead. The other part of the space, I think we're clearly negotiating with bigger operators like fashion, sports, do-it-yourself, and those kind of operators. So we hope to split, if you take the space in Liège, it would be very nice if we split the rest, because it's a very simple rectangle unit. So if we're able to split the other part, 5,000 to 6,000 square meters, in 2 times, 2,500 to 3,000, that's what we're currently working on, with a very nice shop front. I think that would clearly increase the attractiveness of the center as well. Will that go at lower terms? higher terms, whatever. I think it will at least go at the same terms as we have today, and then hopefully getting some compensation will then be a nice one-off. 20% is a clear issue. I think we are in very constructive talks with the FSMA. It is slightly above 20% still. So we have outlined also with the FSMA a clear plan to bring that under 20% before the year end. And there's no indication at all that we are at risk from that perspective.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up then. Are you planning to dispose the remaining office assets in the Belgian market by the end of the year, or is that something that's on the cards?
Well, because of the topic we just talked about, the 20% rule, we cannot dispose at this point in time the remaining offices. Unless we buy a big retail asset. But disposals at this point in time, with the exception of Madou and a very small one in Vilvoorde, but the two bigger ones, you should count that for the time being they will remain in the portfolio.
All right then. Thank you.
The next question comes in from the line of Jaap Kuin. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Just my first question on the MGR uplift, so thanks for providing this detail. Just wondering, looking at those numbers and your long-term view, and currently we're seeing basically the country with the most contracts renewed. In the Netherlands, it's a small negative on MGR uplift. So if you either can describe in hard numbers or in qualitatively how this should kind of evolve for both the Netherlands and for the total in the coming 2-3 years, that would be my first question. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a forward-looking statement, Jaap. I would like to give some color. I think in Belgium we've always shown positive numbers. We basically have those 9-year contracts. And after 9 years we always have a nice uplift still between roughly around 10% on a 9-year contract, so that I don't see any reason why that would change. I think in France we're seeing a little bit better momentum and a slight positive, as indicated, I think in the numbers we've shown you today. Finland, I think in our case is always a little bit more fluctuating. So we've seen overall, we've clearly seen positive numbers. And strongly positive, like last year, 7%. But we also sometimes see small negative numbers, and it also has to do with the 5-year cycles we're in. So, given an indication there for the next 3 years, I would say as we see the current leasing market, which in general in Finland is not that fantastic, but of course we have to benefit from the cinema. And we have to benefit from the food and beverage contracts moving forward. So I also expect they're positive. And in the Netherlands, apart from the structural vacancy units we try to attack, for the time being, the retail market is relatively calm. Physical retail has a little uplift. And we also expect there a slight positive. I'm not going to tell you that's going to be for the next 2 to 3 years. Our target, as you know, longer term is still to be at least 100% above indexation. But that, of course, also depends a little bit on the different cycles in the different countries.
Okay, thanks. And then a small question on Capella. You mentioned that that's more difficult. Can you maybe elaborate just a little bit why that's becoming or has become more difficult?
Now, I think the whole redevelopment there has been more complex than we had anticipated. I think we're working on a few very good structural solutions, like bringing in a very big food grocery store. But I think in general, if you look at the projects we've done the last 2 years, like Maassluis and we're now working on Presikhaaf. Tilburg, I think phase 1 was a good one. It's also well let. We just opened there this street next to Hudson Bay to the EMA, with a very nice Scotch and soda, and a Levi's store opened. So we're making very good progress there. And Capelle is clearly they're underperforming in terms of that. At the end of the day, the investment is higher. And we started this project already a few years ago. Based on different reasons, it was delayed. And then, of course, also the retail market is changing. So I think Capelle for now is our exception to the rule, that I think our developments are well under control. And Tilburg phase 2, as well as Dordrecht, will also be very much under control, with a lot of pre-signing, especially also Dordrecht, where we're also working on a very big food grocery store there. And only then, after that signature is in, we start the redevelopment. And that's going to be a very simple one, like Presikhaaf. So Capelle is the negative exception to the rule. I think for the rest we're very well under control. But based on the fact that it took too long to start, the retail market is changing. Of course, the investment and the development and the building market is booming. So cost of let's say refresh, remodel, and extend have been creeping up the last few years in the Netherlands. It's been a negative for us.
Okay, and then, could you indicate on what, for example, the yield on cost on this project would be for Capelle?
I think it's in the presentation. I'm looking at Ruud now. Page somewhere in the appendixes. It's on page 52. And the current yield on cost is estimated at 5.4%, page 52.
My final question is on kind of the absolute level of your valuations, maybe especially in France, still below kind of 5% levels, and where you see a lack of transaction volume, and now maybe even more companies trying to sell assets. One of your peers this morning also announced increased disposal target. We saw Unibail selling in Spain for around 6% net. Although that doesn't directly relate to your portfolio, could you comment maybe on how comfortable you are with those valuations, and are you thinking about what if scenarios, if yield shifts would be kind of whatever 50 to 100 basis points on your, for example, the impact that would have on your leverage and so on? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll take that question, Jaap. I think on the valuations in France, well, you've seen a small revaluation this time in France. I mean, the yields, like we show on page 19, they are hovering around the 4.6, 4.7%. If you look at net investment yields, I mean, we do keep a very close eye on our valuation results there. We are very much also, of course, working together with the local assessors in France. I think on one particular asset in the south of France, we do keep a very close eye, obviously, because we also know that we will have to reposition that asset in the next few years. So we may see some small downside on that asset. But other than that, I mean, we feel comfortable with the current valuations as they stand. It's still a tough retail market in France, so that may have a future impact, obviously, on the valuations. But again, there at the moment we feel quite comfortable.
And I think maybe you have to add, of course we're running our numbers. I mean, we see what kind of transactions are ongoing in the market. This is general retail. This is not Wereldhave retail. So that's also why we have a clear aim to keep our loan to value longer term below 40%. Because you never know what's going to happen in the retail market, and the retail market as such, of course, is clearly not a favorable one in the hemisphere today in real estate, and that might have an impact on valuations in general. And then, of course, we will also be impacted. So we are running those numbers, and that's why it's very important we keep disciplined on our loan to value, and we are currently, let's say, with 42% at the too high end for ourselves. So we need to keep on being very disciplined. I think, as you know, we took a big hit in France end of last year, and we also have tried there clearly to take such a big hit that, including the contracts we did at the beginning of this year and all the fashion contracts, to make sure that, you know, and I've said that before in our full year numbers, we better take the hit in one, and that hit was quite strong, and therefore you see, in our case, half of this year, a roughly stable value.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. And so on my numbers, because I think you have roughly 100 million to go in your disposal program, if you realize those disposals, you will still not end up at a LTV number below 40%. So what would be kind of the most likely way to arrive at a sub-40 LTV, including the completion of the disposal program?
Well, the answer is very simple, selling a little bit more than 100 million.
And then do you have like a specific idea? Would it then be another 100 million or even more than that?
Well, I guess maybe I can add to that question there, Jaap. We're looking at a number of specific assets, but also we're looking into opportunities to form a joint venture. So in the combination of those two, we believe there should be more room than the 100 million left in our previous stated 200 million.
But I think for commercial reasons, we're not disclosing. We still stick to our original target. That's what we have clearly promised on, and that's what we're going to deliver. But for commercial reasons, we're not going to give a new indication on how much the disposals will be.
Yep.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, we do have one final question coming through from the line of Nico Labacari. Please go ahead.
Okay, just last question on the renegotiation in the ET Center. So could you elaborate a bit more on which anchor tenant was the one that renegotiated? Was it one of the larger discounters or etc.?
I think for, and this may be a disappointing answer, but for commercial reasons, we're not giving any indication on which sector it was. That can only backfire.
All right then. Thank you.
We have no further questions coming through.
Okay, then I would like to thank everybody for dialing and listening in, and I hope to hear you soon after, for instance, the full year results. Have a good day.
Thank you for joining today's call. You may now disconnect your handsets.